Good evening and welcome to the property edition of Your Money, Your Call. It's great to be back for another week of great property information. I'm Margaret Lomas, and in news this week, a council decision to introduce a new council rate category in Mackay, which would see rental property owners slugged an extra $200 a year, has been ruled against in the Supreme Court as an improper exercise of power. North Queensland investors appealed to the Mackay Regional Council decision after extra levies for investors were also introduced in areas such as Rockhampton, Mount Isa, Brisbane, Gold Coast and Logan. According to the Morning Bulletin, the Council are looking to review the judgment, which may set precedents for these other areas. The class action lawsuit was launched last year after around 1,200 objections to the new fee were delivered to Council. The judge ruled that the issue is not whether the Council's assumptions are flawed, but whether the statute permits the Council to categorise land for different rating purposes by reference to the occupation of it by the owner. And set to present at next month's National Real Estate Conference AREC 2014 on the Gold Coast is Jordan Belfort, the man behind the memoir and Martin Scorsese film The Wolf of Wall Street. The choice of Belfort as a speaker has been a decision that has split many members of the industry, with Ray White Cheltenham agent Peter Conadaris recently blogging that it's a huge step backwards. The Real Estate Institute of Victoria has called it a concern, noting that his behaviour doesn't align with the standards and values of the real estate industry and can set a poor example to younger agents. So to start the debate about these top stories, I've invited onto my panel this evening Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad Beer from BMT. So if you have a question or if you have an opinion on any of those stories, call now on 1300 30 34 35 or email me at property@skynews.com.au. But let's not waste any time and let's get on with tonight's program. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Margaret.
Now, I don't know if you're aware of this big kerfuffle over these rates, but it was brought to my attention last Friday. I started an online media campaign, hashtag equal rates for property investors, and in the meantime I found that it's rife throughout Queensland, and in fact property investors are being charged higher rates for the same properties as owner-occupiers. What do you think about it?
Yeah, well, it doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, the person occupying the place is using the same amount of facilities. Why should they pay more? And I think you already look at land tax, investors get slugged where owner-occupiers don't. I think it's just another extra tax they're trying to impose on people they think are wealthy, and as we know, most investors aren't actually that wealthy. They're just middle-income people trying to get ahead.
Now, it's profiteering, absolutely, Brad, and there's a couple of things that have sprung to my mind when all of this began. Firstly, rates are charged according to the value of land, and when we as investors invest in an area, if we all do it together, we raise the value of land. So here we are doing a favour for councils, and here they are slugging us back.
Look, I 100% agree. I think it's rude. I don't have an issue with going, if you want some more services, then I want to charge you some more money and making a choice on that. But what the person uses that property for, we are investing into that area and bringing some housing, some rentals, etc. And I just think it's rude, very rude.
Absolutely. Now, of course, the other thing, Damien, is that I know in Brisbane City Council, and let's not be afraid to name and shame these people because they should be ashamed. Brisbane City Council, hope you're watching, tuning in. I know you watch every week and don't miss it, but Brisbane City Council recently had a post on Facebook. Someone who's one of my viewers and readers actually contacted me and let me have a look at the post. And when he asked them why they did this, they actually came back and said that the reason they were able to charge investors the higher rates was because investors get a tax deduction. Now, if you think about that for a moment, investors all get tax deductions at different rates. Some not at all, depending on how many properties they have. And as you say, many of them are right down to the wire. They're not making money out of it. It's just really their investment for their retirement. If that's the case, if it's because we get a tax deduction, shouldn't they then also consider your tax level before they increase your rates and charge you accordingly.
Yeah.
If you're on the 45 cents in the dollar tax bracket with a bigger deduction, maybe you can pay extra, and if you're only on 15 cents with a smaller deduction, you shouldn't have to pay as much extra.
Well, exactly, that would make sense, but I guess probably administratively wise it'd be very difficult. Look, we've seen recently in the WA state budget land tax up another 10%, 12.5%. They just see investors as easy targets. Very frustrating. They think, again, investors are all wealthy. They're not. We all know that a lot of residential property investors are just average income people. Very frustrating, but they see us as easy targets.
Now, Brad, if we all get miffed at this and all stop investing in those councils who are charging this, and so Logan City, let's name them as well, Rockhampton, Moreton Bay, Shire, these are just the ones I know about, Gold Coast as well. If we all get a bit miffed and we stop investing in there, then potentially they don't have enough rental housing for the demand. Do you think they'll come crawling back to us and plead with us and maybe give us a discount instead?
And then try to do something to reintroduce a way to encourage investors to invest in their area. Like yes, I can understand it. Now we read Facebooked all of and whatever and social media.
I think they say retweet, but anyway, repost, retweet.
As you can see, I'm an expert. All of those, because we work for a lot of investors, or actually only for investors in doing what we do. And I think pretty much all of those would think it was a bit rude as well. So the reasoning is not there. You're not providing a different service, and exactly right. Not everybody pays the same tax rate, so different people are getting a different. And we all make decisions. Well, people that invest make decisions to invest for their future, and they take risk to do that. I've got investment properties, but I've also got a lot of debt. Some people can't sleep with that debt. I'm prepared to take that risk for my future, and so are most investors, and a lot of investors. 60-odd% only ever buy one investment property, probably because they have things like that or bad experiences or don't see some money out of it, because it's not just super easy to go and buy a heap of properties and be rich from property overnight.
Exactly.
You've got to learn some stuff.
Exactly. And, if it's going to be eating into your cash flows, as it does, then it would make you think twice about doing it, and certainly makes it less attractive. And I just don't think these councils have really thought it through. The person who wrote to me pointed out that, if he was a tradesman who worked in the sun and he was allowed to claim his sunglasses as a tax deduction, does that mean he should pay more for those sunglasses?
Exactly.
And no, the answer is no, just because you get a tax deduction. And it's a very weak basis on which to, make an argument for charging those higher rates. So, anyway, look, I've started a Facebook campaign to name and shame the councils, and just in case you didn't hear it before, Brisbane City Council, Logan City Council, and I actually have properties there and quite like them up there at Logan City Council, so I was shocked and horrified. Gold Coast Council, Moreton Bay Council, Mount Isa Council, Rockhampton, to name a few, I believe, councils in there as well. I'm sure there's going to be many, many more, but if you would like to get in on the debate, and we'd love to have your support on this, we want to bring about some change in policy. Now, you can help me by going to either my Facebook page, Margaret Lomas, and reposting and sharing all of the posts I put, my Twitter account, Margaret Lomas AU, and then when you're there, share the posts as often as you can, and also I've created a hashtag, equal rates for property investors. You have to put the hashtag first for people like me who don't know much about social media as well. Hashtag equal rates for property investors, and if we can get that trending as well, we might actually get something done. Incidentally, I've actually posted on some of those councils' websites as well early this morning and had absolutely no response from anyone, and so I think we need to bring about a little bit of pressure. Hashtag as often as you can, post, share, do everything that you possibly can to help us get this change in place. And I guess the next thing that we probably need is a lawyer who is prepared to represent us all for free and mount a class action lawsuit against these councils, and maybe that's the next thing that we actually do.
It would be always nice to not have to go through that to get something, and just for them to be fair in the first place, because no one tends to win out of that.
No, they don't. They don't tend to win at all. But, yeah, look, it would be nice for them to just realise, and I suppose for them what they're going to have to do is come up with some way to replace that income that they've obviously been making very quietly, because I don't know that anyone's really thought about it. Look, the other thing you can do for us is, if you know of any more councils who are doing this, please let me know via Facebook. And if you know of councils who aren't doing this, let's applaud them too, particularly if they're in Queensland, which is where it seems rife. I'd like to know about those ones who have decided against doing that in the interest of fairness, so that we can applaud them and champion them too. We're only just warming up, and remember that you can join with us in our conversation and even get the chance to get a copy of one of my books, Ask a Question and Be the One We Select, and a copy of my brand new book, How to Achieve Property Success, will be on its way to you. Call us on 1300 30 34 35 or email property@skynews.com.au right now with a question, and then make sure you watch at the end of the show to see if we pick you. It's break time, but we will be quick, so stay tuned. We'll see you soon. I'm so glad that you stayed with us. We're in the mood for a debate tonight, and you can give us your 2 cents worth by phoning us on 1300 30 34 35 or emailing us on property@skynews.com.au. Tonight you'll be talking to Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad B from BMT, so get those phones and computers going while there's still time to do so. Now, our first email tonight has a question for Brad, and Gary is asking, I understand that deductions can be claimed on Division 40 and Division 43. Can you please clarify how these are calculated? Also, when determining the asset cost base for capital gains tax calculations, should these deductions be added back? Brad, first of all, probably let's explain what Division 40 and Division 43 actually is.
Yeah, easy. Division 40 and Division 43 are the two parts of depreciation that are claimed on a building by an investor. Division 43 applies to the construction or the structure of the building, and it's a 2.5% deduction currently against the cost of building that building or the structure of that building at the time it was built. In order to claim this deduction, it needs to be built after now 1987. It goes for 40 years from when it was built, and it is always a time of construction thing. That's Division 43. Division 40 is the other part of depreciation, which is called really plant and equipment, and it's kind of more the soft stuff, the carpets, hot water service, stoves, blinds, curtains, things that don't last as long. The tax office puts what they call an effective life on those things, and we claim them quicker. So we identify these things. There's no age restrictions on these things, and that's the other part of depreciation that's claimed. Now, in relation to the capital gains tax, it's a regular question that I get from investors about depreciation and what happens to my capital gains tax. And effectively, some of it you do have to pay back. If you sell the property, some of that is clawed back by the tax office because they can't make it all too easy. But you make these deductions on the way through your property, or through owning your property at your full marginal rate while you own this property. And then at the end, they charge you this capital gains tax, and rightly so, a little bit more, at half the marginal tax rate. And it's pretty easy, probably via a case study, to see how that affects. And I've written a couple of those in the past that say what happens about capital gains tax, and actually crunch some of those numbers, and they're available on the website, or I can drop them to you via email because we have your email address, that runs through what those numbers actually mean. But effectively, yes, the tax office claws some of that money back afterwards.
Let's get this clear though, it's not a clawback. They don't say, look, we've given you this much money, give some of it back. What they actually do is they take the full amount of the deduction. So let's say you've claimed $10,000 worth of depreciation on the building. So they take that $10,000, they add it to your cost base, and what that actually, or they take it off your cost base. So what that actually does is it increases the gain you've made by that $10,000. But then that gain is halved, and then on that half, you pay your capital gains tax on your marginal rate of tax of that half. So you're not paying back your depreciation at all. You're accounting for the deduction, not for the amount of money you got. You're accounting for the deduction, and by the time it's halved and then probably halved again, or really cut in by 2/3,
yes,
it only increases your capital gains tax by a small amount.
Yeah, and so, yeah, that's right. And it also assumes that you made some profit from the sale of the property as well. But yes, effectively that's how it works.
And look, Gary, the other thing that I wanted to point out to you is often people say, well, I'm not going to claim those Division 40 and Division 43 allowances because I'm only going to have to pay it back. We've just demonstrated to you that you don't pay it back. But the important thing is this: the benefit of having the cash in your pocket on the way has a lot of exponential benefits. Having the cash in your pocket along the way means that you can use it possibly for debt reduction on the loan, and if you're reducing debt, you're paying less interest, so then you're saving money there. You're also buying equity in the property, and of course for every $1 in equity that you can buy, that's $5 in more property that you can buy through leverage, so you're essentially able to then gain an exposure to more property sooner, exponentially over time. That all means far more than a tiny little bit of extra capital gains tax that you might pay if you sell, which you're probably unlikely to do anyway. Sally from Melbourne, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Margaret.
What can we do for you, Sally?
I'm the first time. I'm thinking of buying a home for rental. What do I have to look to get a good property, like capital gains or something like that, for future?
Yes. So your question is, what suburb should you buy in?
What suburb and what do I have to look for? Like, do I buy a small apartment so that I don't have to borrow too much money?
Okay.
Or a house where I have to borrow more money?
Okay, we probably need to get a couple of things clear here. First of all, it's very difficult to take a country like Australia and go, that's the best suburb.
Exactly, Margaret. Look, Sally, everyone would love to know the best hotspot, and let's face it, no one is really going to be able to tell you that out of 10,000 plus suburbs around Australia. Certainly, I think Brisbane and Perth are the two places I'd be looking at the moment. Sydney's had a pretty good run. I think it's a bit overheated. And then really got to be looking at the research within that location and, of course, the time frame. Look, the hottest suburb this year may not be the best suburb for the next 5 or 10 years. So a lot of research to do. I'd certainly be focusing around Brisbane, in that 10 to 20k radius out of town. I think there's some good spots. I was up there over the weekend, and certainly some good opportunities up there.
How come I didn't see you over the weekend? You didn't come and say hello to me.
I didn't get to the expo, Margaret. I'm sorry.
You were avoiding me. I know you were. Look, Sally, if I can also add to that, the second part of your question, you asked whether or not you should buy a unit because you wanted to get in more cheaply. Now, first of all, it's a fallacy that buying a unit is the cheaper way to go, and let me tell you why. If you buy a unit in an area that's otherwise a hotspot but has very little demand for units, it could be a very costly mistake. So you shouldn't be deciding on the property type that you're going to buy until you've worked out the area that you should be buying in. And once you've worked out the area that you should be buying in, then you find out who lives there, who's demanding the rentals, and what kind of people they are, and therefore you'll know what to buy for them. If you were to buy a unit in an area where everyone has got 3 kids, a dog, 2 cars, and, they're a family, then nobody's going to come and rent that from you, and that's going to affect both your capacity to see a good yield and your ability to sell at the end of the time. Very important that the very first thing that you do is that you first of all look for those growth drivers, things that make property grow, like an increasing household income, lots of infrastructure by the council, transport nodes in the area, schools, parks, lots of sporting facilities, a population that's actually growing faster than the national average, and accessibility to the nearest large city as well, even though people don't necessarily want to live in the city. And so, as Damian was saying, in places like Brisbane and Perth and even Adelaide, the suburbs are faring really well so far this year, and it looks to be set to continue, and that's the kind of place that you should be looking at, and then decide the kind of property you'd like to buy. Well, we could talk all night, certainly I could, but every now and then we have to go for a commercial break, and now's that time. While we're gone, you can call and get in that queue with your question. The number is 1300 30 34 35, and the email address is property@skynews.com.au. We won't be long, so don't go away. Good to see that you're still here and watching to learn some more great property investing tips. Here with me is Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad Beer from BMT. So call us right now with any property question on 1300 30 34 35, or you can email us on property@skynews.com.au. Now, it's a little quiet tonight, and I know that that usually means that I have to tell everyone who calls that they're going to get a copy of one of my books. So I reckon it's time for us to say every caller who has their question answered on the show tonight, and every email that gets read out tonight will get a copy of one of my books. So there's the incentive for you. And while we're waiting for those calls now to flood in, I just want to point out the next news story, which was a bit of a shock to me, and I guess not a shock because it's happening everywhere, but Jordan Belfort, of course, the Wolf of Wall Street, he seems to be being championed and revered, and he's being paid countless thousands and thousands of dollars to speak at AREC, which is the Australian Real Estate Convention, in a couple of weeks' time up on the Gold Coast, I think it's going to be. How do you feel about that?
Look, Eric are good operators. I've been to some of their conferences and they run good shows and great for real estate agents. Look, it's been controversial. It's been around for a while. It was announced quite a few months ago, but really now the conferences coming up is getting a lot of heat. Look, probably in hindsight, maybe not the greatest choice for them, and I guess this guy's coming out and saying he's reformed, and that's his story. But obviously, I saw the movie, very interesting. Wouldn't let my children see it. Certainly, it was an interesting movie. But look, probably not the best choice in hindsight, and it certainly has caused a lot of controversy in real estate.
Brad, I think John McGrath has been instrumental in organising him to be there, and he's come out in his defence, in his own defence, saying that, you know, he offers this fabulous sales training program. But to me, that's a bit scary, because that same sales training program was what ripped off literally hundreds and even thousands of people who today live in retirement in, you know, not so much poverty, but with no money, certainly. Hasn't paid it back. He's paid some of it back. He was charged with a felony and served considerable time in jail over it. Should we be championing and applauding those people by giving them a stage?
We tend to do that in this country, though.
Yeah, we do, don't we?
If you look at things like, you know, the crime shows, the underbellies, the whatever, they become so popular, and we seem to love that. And I don't know why we seem to have a want to see what's going on. I guess is it because it's controversial and it's something that's different? Now, I'm actually going to attend ARIC, so I suppose I'll probably go and have a look out of interest. I haven't seen the movie as yet, but I've seen a previous of the movie, of course. But it doesn't send there's part of it that sends a bit of a, you know, interesting message about the real estate industry. And I don't know whether they thought about it that way, or is it just to get some people there because it is so controversial and people may come and listen to some of the strategies that we use. Well,
it's interesting that you say that, because it's the largest attendance that they've ever had, and despite the fact that maybe 50% of the audience, I don't know how much, have come out and said that they'll boycott it and they won't go to that session. There's going to be an equal number of fascinated people, just like you. You've just admitted that you're going to go. Yeah, well, you know, you could at least boycott it, Brad, since it's probably the wrong thing to do. I certainly would be boycotting it. I wouldn't care about my fascination or curiosity. It's probably the wrong thing to go for us to hold someone up there and revere them in that way, when in reality, he's a crook.
Interesting, he was interviewed on one of the major news channels, and there was a lot of people on Facebook actually applauding him. So it's a bit of a sad indictment, really, isn't it, that people think that if you make money that way, it's still okay, and it's not.
It's a little upsetting. Well, it's great to see young people getting ahead, and Barry wrote this week to say, I'm 24 and my partner and I just bought a house in Metford, which is near Maitland. I am moving there in a matter of weeks. Now, I still own a house in West Beach, Esperance, which is in Western Australia, with $360,000 owing $100,000 in offset, worth about $420,000. I'd love to know if you think I should sell and buy a more appropriate investment property, or hold and rent the house for around $380 a week. So, you know, this is pretty easy, Damian, because it doesn't come down to feelings or opinions, really. It comes down to whether or not Esperance presents a good investing opportunity, really. Since he lives in that property at the moment, it's a capital gains tax-free asset at the moment. What do you think?
Oh, Barry, look, I think Esperance is one of the most pretty spots in Perth, but it is a long, long way. It's about 7 hours drive from Perth.
So it's not in Perth, even.
Exactly. Sorry, it's in WA, I should say. It's a long way away. It's got it services the farming in the area. It's the mining sector as well, and fishing and tourism. But look, there's nothing that I can see in that area that's going to drive prices. I'd certainly be thinking, for your point, take the money, if it's a capital gains tax-free, and pay down your debt on your new house.
Sounds like fabulous advice to me. We do have to stop right there for a minute or so while we go to a break. But do come back, because we're only just getting started. I've got more chances to get my book when we come back, right after this short break. So don't go anywhere. It's great that you've joined my fabulous panel and I this Monday night. It's been my pleasure to have with me on the panel tonight Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad Beer from BMT. The show isn't over yet by a long shot, so there's plenty of time to get your question answered by phoning 1300 30 34 35 or emailing us on property@skynews.com.au. And once again, I very generously offered for every caller who has their question read or answered, and every email that has their question answered tonight only, you'll get a copy of one of my books. So, Charles from Brisbane, you're on the line, and of course you have gotten a copy of one of my books. What can I do for you?
Yeah, thank you. I'm actually a developer in Indooroopilly area in Brisbane. We are thinking about launching our dozens of units sometime in September this year or sometime next year. My question is, am I on the right time to start my pre-sale campaign, or better wait until sometime next year? And also, the other question is, what is the best strategy to market my product? Because we found out that some of the agents are asking too much. Sometimes they ask for something like a 5% commission, which is too much to do a small developer like us. So what do you think, please?
Okay. A tricky one for us to answer, really, because we're not developers or marketers. But Brisbane is certainly running a little hot at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
So now's probably the time.
Charles, look, I think the sooner the better. Brisbane's certainly still in growth mode, and barring any economic calamities, I think it'll run through into next year. But as a developer, obviously, you need to get pre-sales to get the bank to fund your construction projects. So I'd be saying sooner rather than later. You just don't know when the market's going to change. As for the marketing groups, look, just be conscious of people asking for 5%. As long as you're selling your product at fair price, you should be able to pay the standard convention is 2 to 3% to selling agents. So if you price them fairly, you market it well, you make sure it's out there, I'm sure you'll get them away at a fair price. You don't need to pay those excessive fees, which sometimes go to those two-tiered marketing groups, which definitely concern me.
And it would be good, wouldn't it, Brad, if we could have a developer who didn't go out and offer $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to salespeople to sell their properties, and that maybe these properties can be delivered at true intrinsic market value for a change.
And like, if people actually did a decent amount of research and looked around at what was on the market in that space, there should be do some comparisons between the stock that exists. Now, there's not a massive shortage of available stock in Brisbane. Now, the market's a bit hot, so it's probably, I guess earlier rather than later is probably a good time, because you don't know what next year is necessarily going to look like, and you need some pre-sales. But if there's too much commission put in there, or if there's too many hands in the pot, so to speak, I suppose, then it's got to inflate the price of that product. And at the end of the day, the value is going to compare with what else is on the market, and that's what's going to matter when it comes down to the investor making money out of these properties. So you've got to, the buyer's going to do some research. Now, if you price them right and don't have too much of those things in there, they're probably going to sell quicker.
Absolutely, yeah, and I agree. And I think if you can be one of the few developers who does come in and offers property at market value, you shouldn't have any trouble with them, and now is definitely the time. Paul, you're also from Brisbane. How can we help you, Paul?
Oh, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I've got another question about Brisbane. Looking at sort of future long-term growth areas, and I was just wondering what your thoughts were on Redbank Plains and that surrounding area.
Yes. Look, Brad, I like Redbank Plains. It's, of course, part of that whole area in between Loganshire and Ipswich. It's previously been a not-so-favoured area. There was a fair amount of state or housing commission properties there, which have now been sold down. Some really big blocks there as well. A little bit of mine subsidence in parts of Redbank Plains. But what do you think about it?
Well, we've talked much about, I guess, Loganshire and Redbank Plains being sort of not too far from that. And I bought a property there late last year.
Oh, did you?
Well, not in Redbank Plains, but Loganshire.
Your first one outside of New South Wales as well?
It's not quite, but it's very, very small. And I drove through and had a bit of more of an actual look around that area yesterday. And it's always been, I don't have an issue with buying in those areas, because I think there's still an effect of the growth, and I get some return out of those things, and I'm okay with buying own properties in those type of areas, most definitely. And it was actually not as bad as I expected.
Be careful, we've probably got viewers from Redbank Plains. It's a lovely area.
I actually think it's okay, but when you see that, and sometimes you see, in some areas you can see things, and you sort of think, things that aren't so great.
Yeah.
I didn't probably see some of those things that I expected to see, so I have a better opinion of it, having spent some more time there.
Yeah, and of course, Damian, that whole area, it's like the fastest growing part of Brisbane, really. That corridor from Springfield Lakes all the way down through the Ipswich and even up into Toowoomba.
Yeah.
It's the fastest growing corridor, certainly from a demographics perspective. The population's going crazy there. The median household income is definitely changing.
Yeah.
You know, you can't ignore those kinds of things.
Absolutely, and that's the good thing that Brisbane's got going for it in those surrounding areas. It's the population growth. It's certainly, you know, apart from Perth, it's the fastest growing city in Australia. And look, Brisbane City Council got a big strategic plan. Have a look at that. There's a lot of the growth nodes up in Chermside and Mount Gravatta, some other spots that we've had a look at over the weekend. So Red Bag Plains, I think, will do fine. But yeah, do your research, and there's some good opportunities in Brisbane, I think.
And Paul, with a little bit of luck, our campaign for Logan Shire to not charge you more rates just because you're a property investor, hopefully that will work. And don't forget to hashtag equal rates for property investors so that we can get these councils not to be penalising investors. But that entire area is certainly a favourite of mine and has been for such a long time now. I first invested there around about 9 years ago. I've already seen my money double once. It's still quite low there. I expect that that's going to happen again in the coming years. So it's a great place to invest. It's really where all of the money is going in terms of infrastructure as well, and lots of foreign investment too, lots of Asian investment into the Logan Shire, and there's no holding them back now. I think it's a great place to be buying. Well, let's pause for a moment while we take a break, but when we return, you'll have another chance to ask your questions simply by calling us on 1300 30 34 35 or emailing us on property@skynews.com.au. Welcome back to Your Money, Your Call. I'm Margaret Lomas, and the debate tonight has been fantastic. Joining me is Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad Beer from BMT, who are both standing by now to take your calls on 1300 30 34 35 or via email at property@skynews.com.au. Ron, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Margaret. Margaret, I had a question. I'm from Melbourne, and I'm not talking about exciting Brisbane at the moment, but something close to my heart, Mornington Peninsula. And I remember 3 years back you talked about Frankston quite a lot. And my question is, why has Frankston not gone up so much, and even the suburbs like Seaford? I'm very interested in your views about whether the prospects are still good for that particular area.
Absolutely. And look, Brad, I'm still quite keen on Frankston, and in fact it has gone up a fair bit since we first started talking about it. You know, we've certainly seen about a 30% growth rate since it first started to get introduced on this show. What do you think of it, the gateway to the Mornington Peninsula?
Well, I haven't, you know, as you say, if it had some growth, then that's probably nothing to be too unhappy about. Has it had as much growth as somewhere else? Well, if we had a crystal ball, we could have answered that and not bought there and bought wherever there was the best. I still don't have a problem with Frankston. It's the I don't know what the rental yields are like there right now based on prices, but if it hasn't had some sort of boom, I can't see it's changed substantially, and it hasn't had any major negatives in the area that mean there's loss of jobs or anything like that.
No, nothing like that.
So I don't have major negative issues with that. But when you get down to Mornington, I suppose, it becomes a bit more lifestyle, a bit more holiday, I suppose, because it commutes a bit further. Frankston's still able to commute without a whole...
Certainly further down to the Mornington Peninsula, far too premature for that. And although Frankston hasn't had this massive, big sort of boom all in one go, we also have to remember that some of those areas that have that big boom have been a very long period of plateauing, whereas Frankston tends to have that capacity to grow and grow and grow year in, year out.
Look, it's one of those areas, obviously the Peninsula Freeway's there now. It's got all the right freeway access. You can get from there very quickly all around basically Melbourne all the way through. It's got, you know, things happening. It's just one of those areas that came from a perceived lower socioeconomic area. It'll take time to transform, but all the fundamentals are right. It's just going to take maybe a bit longer.
And you're right. The last thing to go now, Ron, is just the impression about the area and the judgment of the local people. Certainly the council's doing a fabulous job, and they're developing the foreshore, and it's looking quite lovely. I was down there just a short time ago. The fundamentals are there. The rental yields are still in the sixes. We have had a bit of a flattening for the last 2 years or so, but we're still coming off a fairly low base with very affordable housing and lots of options. We also have to remember that, in my opinion, the population the concentration of population has moved out east from Melbourne, and we see that real family demographic really being centred around the Narrow Warren area, and that's almost become the family capital, I guess, of Melbourne, where we're seeing a lot of development happening, both residential development, commercial development, and it's now rolling on through Pakenham and then further on into the Cardinia Shire. Because of that, that then brings Frankston into the framework of that whole Narrow Warren area, and the relevance of Melbourne to Frankston begins to be reduced as the relevance of areas like Narrow Warren to Frankston starts to improve. Seaford along the waterfront, you have seen some good growth there. In the suburbs behind the waterfront, we're going to start to see that moving, and I can't see any problems there. I think it's still a great place to buy. Clinton from Adelaide, welcome to the program.
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
The question I've got, I have owned my first house.
Yes.
But I sold it.
Okay.
I've got 20 grand for a deposit for a new home, for another house, but I can't get enough money saved for about 280 because the bank I've got 20 grand, but the bank won't lend me 200,000.
Okay. So
help.
Okay, so your question is, how can we magically create another 10 grand for you? In fact, Damian, he needs a bit more than 10 grand. He's going to need to have probably 10%. So if we said 250, if he's in Adelaide and looking in Adelaide, he'll get something pretty good for 250.
Yeah.
He's going to need the 25, stamp duty of about 8, so 32, few costs, maybe about 35. 15 short. Have you got any short-term solutions?
Clinton, you got a good family or friends to ask for money? Mum, maybe? Look, there are loans out there, 95%. We've done some for clients, but you're paying pretty hefty LMI, lender's mortgage insurance. You can add that to the loan with a couple of lenders. But I guess obviously you've still got the problem. If you're not saving a lot of money at the moment, how are you going to afford the home when you get in there? So, look, you could possibly do a 95% on that basis, 12.5, and then 8 or 9 for the stamp duty. But can you afford that? You've got to be comfortable with that. So I'd recommend saving a bit more, perhaps, and looking at it that way. And those mortgage insurance rates are pretty hefty.
Brad, I guess, it should be pointed out that even though you can get 95% loans from some people, typically they'll provide them to owner-occupiers who they know have been meeting rent payments and, will actually get equity and stay there for some time. If it's a 95% loan you're after, you've suddenly boosted the risk, haven't you, considerably?
There's definitely a boosting of the risk there because you've effectively got no equity in your property at all. You've got no buffer. You've got nothing left there. Now, the bank, I think, normally the banks and the lenders assess your ability to, and will give you a certain amount of money based on their belief that you're going to be able to afford to pay it back. So a good hard look at whether you can afford any more than that is probably the first thing to do. Now different lenders have different criteria and take different things into account with that, so that's probably something to consider. But still, just because someone will give you the money is not always a reason to go and borrow it.
Exactly.
And you are definitely adding to that risk. But, a lot of people do 95% lends and it's okay. If you're buying the right property in the right area, well, maybe you've got to look at a slightly different area with a slightly cheaper property and negotiate hard and find a good deal is probably a good place to start as well.
Absolutely.
And look at what you...
Well, Clinton, I do have a bit of a magic solution for you, but before I give it to you, I want you to reassure me that you, in fact, are just premature in wanting to get into property and you do have that savings capacity. The reason you don't have the 35 is not because you can't save, and I'm wondering if that's the case since you got the 20 grand out of the house. How long has it been? Have you got the capacity to save? If you don't have the capacity to save, then you shouldn't be even thinking about property until you can develop some really good savings habits. Once you can do that, then go out and get your normal 90 or 85% loan. However, if there's been a good reason that you haven't been able to save and you know from here on in you can save really well, and if you've got a mum and dad who do like you, most mum and dads like their kids, some of them don't, I like most of mine, then what you can get with some banks is what they call a parental pledge. And the way the parental pledge works is that if your parents have property, the bank will allow the parent to give almost a little piece of that property as equity into the mix so that you only have to borrow 80% of all of the security. You still get all the money you need to buy the property, but across all the securities it's only 80%. So they give enough of their property to create that difference between what you're going to get in the property you're going to buy and what's missing to get you to the 80%. Then, when the property has grown in value enough, and when you've paid enough off the loan so that your own property can stand alone with an 80% loan, they'll release the parent's home as security. It's called a parental pledge. It's not that easy to get. You've got to have an absolute pristine history. Nothing on your credit reference, no credit cards, no car loans, and a really good capacity to save. But under those circumstances, you just might be able to get into that property. Well, even though it's getting late, there is some time left, but we have to go off for our last break. Now, you can call while we're gone on 1330 3435, or you can also email us on property@skynews.com.au. We'll be right back. And for the final time tonight, welcome back to Your Money, Your Call. I'm Margaret Lomas, and I've been lucky enough to host Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth and Brad Beer from BMT. And we have answered all of your calls, and if you have a question, you can still call us on 1300 30 34 35 or email us on property@skynews.com.au. Just like Pete has, and Pete says, we haven't, he has actually asked, thanks for your show, I love it. Thank you, Pete. What's your view on student housing in Bulimba? I've got a house there and it's not a student area, but I need more yield. So Brad, Bulimba is of course Brisbane south, kind of a little eastish, down from Brisbane city, but very close to the city. He's thinking of taking that house, chopping it up and renting it out to students. You got any advice for Pete?
Well, the fact that you said it's not a student area probably rings a bit of an alarm bell to me, because the fact is you're not going to get students to live in a place where they don't want to live. Students often don't have cars or much money or want to use more public transport than they have to. They want to live close to what is the thing they're studying at, the university or whatever. If it's not a student area, that's going to be a big problem, number one. Student housing also has its level of problems sometimes. I've got properties that are probably in student areas, and I don't necessarily always want to try and put students in there, but I do like to make my leases available at the right time of year, so I've got the pressure on the market. Not this, that's the question here necessarily, but student areas do funny things with property. And if you're not in one, though, trying to make it into one's really going to be a struggle.
Absolutely. Of course, Damian, even in areas where there's a university, there are some significant drawbacks to student accommodation.
Look, obviously you've got a lot more people trying to rent them out room by room. That's typically how they do it. I still think there's problems with landlords' insurance about that. And what happens if something goes wrong in the kitchen? Who's responsible if you're renting out 4 separate rooms to 4 separate people? You mentioned it's not actually in a student area. Look, when I've looked at it, for all the extra intensive maintenance and that you've got to do, that's going to get wear and tear on the property, the extra hassle of renting, I just don't think it's that profitable. Maybe there's a way you can renovate the property, do something else to it to get that yield up rather than focusing on student housing.
And you know, Brad, it's not just the fact that you've got high maintenance because of the wear and tear. Generally, students can't do a single thing for themselves. So, you know, change a light bulb, send a handyman, $100 for the handyman. But you were talking about it being seasonal. So what can and does happen with a lot of student housing is it's rented from February to November, and then you can't get anyone in over the break. And very often that increased rental yield that you might be able to get from renting out the rooms isn't really worth that kind of vacancy. And
that's definitely the case. So being only student related means you're stuck into that market if you turn to one that's some sort of property that really is focused so heavily on students. I've had some students in properties, and students do need someone. And I was a student once.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were a student in a property once.
In a property, and I rented properties. And I also got knocked back from properties as a student when we didn't party hard and do some of the things that probably students sometimes do to houses. But it is a risk versus return type of thing with investing that you've got to look at. Like anywhere and anything, what is if you turn it into student housing, any property into student housing in a student area even, can you actually change it back in terms of vacancy and make it into something else?
And I guess, Damien, that's the other thing, isn't it? If it's just a normal house with 1 bedroom and 4 4 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, then you can't just turn it into student housing. If you're going to rent it out by the room, everyone has to have their own bathroom. They're not going to share. They're not going to do that.
You'd be surprised at what people try and do. They do try and rent them out room by room, and I wouldn't be too keen sharing a bathroom with 3 other strangers and a kitchen. And look, the extra...
Oh, yeah, students do share a lot of stuff, don't they?
They're on low budget, so they're willing to do that. But then you get the issues of, who's responsible for the kitchen? And if something goes wrong in the kitchen, who do you charge for that? It gets already very messy. And the extra rent you get from the property manager, a lot of property managers won't do it. We won't do it. I won't do it room by room for our clients. If they want to do it, they have to do it themselves. It takes a lot more maintenance, a lot more time of management. And for the extra rent you get, I don't think it's worth the aggravation.
And good point about the landlord's insurance, because a landlord's insurer most definitely won't insure that. You have to have a permanent lease in place. A lot of people don't even realise that with landlord's insurance, if you're on a month-to-month lease with your permanent tenants, then often you're not covered by your landlord's insurance. You have to actually be on a proper signed term lease. So you certainly wouldn't get one with those students, and that's probably when you're going to need your landlord's insurance the most, I would expect, when you've got students in. So I'd be very careful of that one, and I'd look to other ways to try to boost the rent if you could. Well, for this week, that's all we have for you. But next week is another week, and I'll be back with a brand new guest. And, of course, it will be Michael Tees. We haven't seen him for a while, and I'm very much looking forward to having him back on the show. Thank you to my guest, Damian Collins from Momentum Wealth, and Brad Beer from BMT, who will, of course, be back again very soon. Now, thanks also to all of our callers and also our emailers. As you know, I have offered to give all of you a book. In order to get that book, you need to email me on yourmoneyyourcall@destiny.com.au and tell me who you are and which question it was that you asked. Once you've done that, we will send you a copy of my brand new book, How to Achieve Property Success. Now, if you didn't call or email or get your question answered tonight, you can get hold of a copy for yourself from all good bookstores, from most of the bad bookstores, and also from my online store at destiny.com.au. Now, coming up in May and June is our fabulous Essential Property Education course at Destiny, conducted in all of my branches in Sydney, Melbourne, Gold Coast, Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth. Now, you just have time to register for the Brisbane course starting on Saturday. So go to destiny.com.au and visit the events page to find out more. You can follow me on Twitter, Margaret Lomas AU, and on Facebook. And don't forget, hashtag equal rates for property investors if you want to help us to get those Brisbane councils, Brisbane City, Rockhampton, Townsville, Logan, Moreton Bay, Gold Coast, to name a few, and I'm sure there'll be more. If you want to get them to now charge equal rates for property investors, hashtag equal rates for property investors. Thank you for being with us. I'll see you all again next week.
The information featured in this program is general in nature and therefore should not be relied upon. Guests appearing on the program may have commercial arrangements with some of the companies mentioned. Before making any investment, insurance or financial planning decisions, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you.